So here we are again with Brendan McCauley in the U version 2 podcast. And today we have a special guest, Edie Weinstein. And Edie, I'm not going to introduce you as to what I may define you from reading your bio, but I do love some of the description you use. You're helping people to live rich, full, juicy lives. So could you tell us more?
Sure.
Edie Weinstein.
Yeah, absolutely. Just a little bit of background. I'm what I call myself is professionally polyamorous. I have a number of different overlapping jobs at the same time. So I'm a licensed social worker, psychotherapist, interfaith minister, journalist, author, editor, what else? PR and marketing person. And I'm the founder of Hug Mobsters Armed with Love. We do free hugs worldwide. And I was telling you before the interview that in 2018, I went to Ireland and I hugged my way across Ireland.
Oh,
and I have to tell you, the Irish people are very huggy people. So I experienced a lot of good hugs. And that's part of living a rich, full, juicy life, is following your bliss, being your bliss. The trip itself, I promised you the story behind it, took place in May of 2018. And for a very long time, it was on my bucket list to go. No, I have no Irish ancestry. In this lifetime, Russian Jewish immigrant family came to America. But there was something about that culture that really appealed to me. And John O'Donohue was one of my favorite poets and writers. So early that year, I was about to turn 60. And I said, this is going to be my year to do this. If not now, when? So I started thinking, well, I don't drink. So a typical pub tour would not have been much fun. And I said, all right,
things to do.
What's that? Sorry.
There's other things to do when we think about it.
I found that out. So I said, okay, Spirit, you be my tour guide. Please help me find the right tour. So in March of that year, I received an email from a woman whose work I was familiar with. I think in 2004, I saw a video that she and her husband had produced called A Knock at the Door. And it was Celtic music and fairy imagery and poetry woven throughout it. So you can look it up, A Knock at the Door. And the couple was Angie Sullins and Silas Tobal that created this. So fast forward again, 2004, I get an email from Angie, totally out of the blue. We'd never connected before. And part of what she does is she's a greeting card writer. And I've done greeting card texts and I've written poetry. So she contacted me and said, I would like to use one of your pieces in my greeting card line. Would that be okay with you? And what it was, I wouldn't even call it a poem. I would say that it was more an inspired little blip of writing. And it said, I'm not just an optimist. I'm an opti-mystic, OPTI-mystic, who sees the world through the eyes of possibility. So she said, I'd like to talk to you about using that. So we connected, and it turns out that not only is she a writer and a poet and a designer, greeting card writer, she is also a tour guide. And her company is called Muse Juice Tours. And she was taking a group of people in May to Ireland. There was one spot left. And I said, okay, can you hold it for a day? I need to check my finances and check my schedule, and I'll get back to you. And one of the jobs I had at the time was teaching mindfulness to little kids in preschools, daycare centers.
Wonderful.
So that morning I went to the job, and the receptionist who always checks me in was wearing this beautiful scarf. And I commented on it, and she lifted it up, and at the bottom of the scarf was a shamrock. And I said, oh, did you get that in Ireland? She said, no, it's from Ireland, and I've always wanted to go. So I told her my story, and she said, you're the sign. I'm the sign that you're looking for. Because I said I was looking for a sign to say, okay, go. She says, I'm your sign. You need to go. So later that day, I got back to Angie. I said, okay, I'm on board with this. And then on April 1st, I was in the hospital with pneumonia. And the trip was, I think, May 10th. And I thought, oh my God, how am I going to be ready in a month to traipse around Ireland? So when I got home, a friend of mine came over, Ernie, and he brought food and he brought little gifties. And one of them was this little notebook that had an elephant on the front, and it said, "Follow your bliss." And on the back of it, which I didn't notice until he left, turned it over. Guess who had created it? Angie and Silas.
This lady.
So, yeah, that the woman and her husband. So I said, okay, I'm going. 2 weeks before the trip, I'm on a train from Philadelphia back home to where I live, which is Dublin, Pennsylvania. And I hear this man talking to his 2-year-old son behind me. And the little boy's crying, and his daddy's trying to comfort him. And I walk back there because I'm also a clown, and her name is Feather. She's a fairy, so I always carry little feathers with me. And I asked the little boy, "Would you like this feather?" He's just crying. And I said, "Can I give it to your daddy, and he'll give it to you when you feel better?" Okay. So as we're talking, I say to the man, "Do I detect an Irish accent?" And he said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, what's your name?" He said, "Jay Murphy." And I'm thinking, that name sounds so familiar. Couldn't place it. So they got off at a stop before mine, and I'm still pondering it. When I got home, I looked his name up. Turns out that Jay and I had met 5 years earlier at an event called Mo Mondays, which is Motivational Mondays.
Yes.
So it's like a local version or regional version of a TED Talk.
Yes.
So
Very good.
he was talking about growing up in Ireland, being a musician, moving to the United States. And at dinner that night, we sat next to each other, and I said, "Can you tell me where a vegetarian teetotaler goes in Ireland? Because eventually I'm going to go." He says, "Darling, a vegetarian teetotaler doesn't go to Ireland. She goes to Ohio." So, what are the chances? 2 weeks before my trip, 5 years earlier, I connect with this guy, from 5 years earlier. So I was healthy enough to go on the trip. I walked around a lot. I was one of the older ones on the trip, and I was somehow able to keep up. And when I couldn't, I just sat and rested. That's all.
Yeah, do it at your own pace.
Yeah, absolutely. So while I was there, my favorite place was Ayr Square Park in Galway. Have you ever been there?
Yes, indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. So I walked through there, and there was this young man, probably in his late teens, early 20s, shirtless. And he had this big container of soapy water and a big bubble wand. So he was blowing these massive bubbles you could walk through.
Right.
So at the time, I had very short hair, and it was dyed purple. So I approached him with my free hug sign. I said, "Would you like a hug?" So he hugged me, and he had dreads down to here, and big gap between his teeth. Very just, easily recognizable person, if I were ever to see him again. Yeah. So I gave him a hug, and then I was on my way. And then I walked back through the park, and he says, "Come here, come here." And I said, "What?" He says, "You come from the land of the purple marshmallow people," because I was wearing a purple scarf too, and purple hair. And he says, and he gives me another hug. Then he starts rubbing his head against my shoulder like a kitty cat. And he says, "I'm wearing patchouli oil, and I want to get some on you." So he was one of my most memorable people from the trip. So if any of your listeners has ever thought about going to Ireland, go. It was a phenomenal place to, as you well know.
But isn't it amazing, Eddie, how you started an idea and an opportunity arose, and you started focusing in on that, and certain things started connecting and working together for the good of getting you to that place. And because sometimes when we think we want to do something, or we'd like to go and start something or achieve something, we're like, oh, think of all the hurdles of reasons why not to go or why we can't. Right. Yep. However, sometimes if we just give it the opportunity, it presents itself, and we need to be willing to open to see those signs and go with it, and make those connections. And as you just demonstrated in some of your description, talk, share. If we're sitting in silence, sometimes we never get that opportunity to have that moment, or to have that opportunity to take it further, and talking and conversation and sharing and that little smile. They're little things and triggers that may open up a conversation or open up a door or an opportunity. So it's a fantastic story, and I'm glad you enjoyed your
your trip. Absolutely. Yeah, the other couple quick things about Ireland. We went to the cliffs of Was it pronounced Moore? Moore?
Yeah, Cliffs of Moher,
Cliffs of Moher.
beautiful spot.
And what I discovered about it was that it was the site of two blockbuster movies. One of them was one of the Harry Potter movies was filmed there, and the other was one of my favorite movies, The Princess Bride.
Oh,
That's
a great movie. It's a great movie.
Yeah, the Cliffs of Insanity that they were climbing, it was filmed there.
Wow, I didn't know that. That's fantastic.
Yeah, yep.
Right, know.
Yep. Yeah. So that was pretty cool. And I did go into pubs. I just didn't drink alcohol. That's all. And the music was wonderful.
Yeah.
And so again, more sheep than people, and that they were dyed different colors. Yes. Instead of being branded, the ranchers and farmers dyed the sheep all different rainbow
they could
colors.
tell them apart.
Yeah. So that part was good too.
Where I grew up in my younger days, grew up in Northern Ireland. Along the north coast there, you have Giant's Causeway and various things. So absolutely, in the north, south, east, and west of Ireland, there's beautiful places to visit and observe. And the thing is, you mentioned about Ireland, the island of saints and scholars, and drinkers. I actually I did a 1 year no beer, no alcohol challenge last year, and because I don't know, Northern Europeans or a lot of people in general, they associate pleasure and happiness and various things by consuming alcohol because it reduces their barriers and they can open up. A lot of those things I've realized, they're in our minds because we can still be happy, still communicate, still have lots of fun, and actually have more energy by not consuming alcohol. So that was an experience for me, and I'm sure a lot of people back in my homeland of Ireland. It's a challenge, but it's still possible to have a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah.
10
One of my hats is that I'm an addictions counselor. So I work with people in recovery, and a lot of my friends are in recovery as well. And the people that I know who've said, okay, alcohol does not, I want to change my relationship with alcohol. It doesn't have to be at the center of my life. And the folks that I know that are sober are happier now than they were when they were drinking. So this isn't about judging anybody who drinks, but it's about considering someone's relationship with alcohol. So I can't remember the last time I had a drink. Like a lot of people, when I was in college, I overindulged and scared myself. And now it's like, no big deal. Now chocolate's my drug of choice. So
actually,
it's a little
I'm really enjoying Italian ice cream.
The gelato, is that?
Yeah. It's a little crux. So if I could ask you a simple question, I'm sure you, being an ambassador of hugs and spreading hugs and many things, I know that you'll have a good one on this one for us. So, Edie, what does happiness mean to you?
Happiness. Okay. Happiness, I think, is an inside job. It doesn't have to be anything that's externally sourced, because life changes. I mean, you look at, as we're talking right now, it's April 13th, 2022. We're in the midst of a pandemic. We're in the midst of a terrifying war in Ukraine. We're in the midst of violence off the scales. Yesterday, I think it was, a man was in a train station, subway station in Brooklyn, shot 12 people, 13 people, something like that. Fortunately, they all lived. So we're living in scary times.
Yeah, for sure.
Happiness to me is being able to find joy in the midst of all the craziness that's going on in the world. So right now, as we're talking, it's 8:23 a.m. Eastern time. I'm looking out my back window, and my next door neighbor's dogs were out in the yard. The flowers are blooming. The sun is shining. It's a gorgeous day. So sitting here looking at that and talking to you at the same time, there's a sense of presence and a sense of wonder. There are no bombs falling in my part of the world. I'm looking across my office here and I'm seeing an Om sign that a friend of mine had given me, a bunch of prayer icons from his home. One of them is a dancing Shiva. Another I have here is a Buddha. I've got plants. I'm looking around parts of my house, and these are simple things. So finding joy in simplicity. It doesn't have to be a big fancy life.
Yeah.
Happiness to me is connection. Excuse me, being with people that I love. And this has been a really tough 2 years
Yeah,
for
for
a
sure.
lot of us.
Absolutely. Great point.
Yeah. So in the very beginning, I was incredibly hug deprived because I went from doing my free hugs events where, I'm one of those people that stands on a street corner with a sign offering hugs. And I would say that in an hour's time, in one of my free hug strolls, I would hug maybe 100 people.
Mm-hmm.
I also facilitate a workshop called Cuddle Party. So the website is cuddleparty.com. And that's a non-sexual workshop for adults that involves nurturing, platonic touch by consent. I haven't done one of those in more than 2 years. So
Yeah, because we
miss
haven't been allowed to because of proximity and things like that.
right. And there are people that are starting to facilitate them again with proper screening and vaccines and all that. I'm still not ready to do that. I don't want to put anybody at risk, and I don't want to put myself at risk.
Yes.
As you can tell sometimes by my talking, I have COPD. So it's, I want to stay safe. I also have a 2-year-old grandson and then one on the way in a month from now.
Fantastic.
So I need to keep them safe. So I miss that physical contact with a bunch of people.
Yeah.
I'm starting to ease my way back out. I am fully vaccinated and boosted. I wear a mask. So connection with people is a huge source of happiness for me.
Yeah. One of the things that, in Italy here, and Europeans, when they introduce themselves and they're sort of someone, they'd give the hug and the 2 kisses on the cheeks. Mm-hmm. And when COVID kicked in and, that suddenly stopped. And it was very, very strange for Italian friends to not be able to do that because it was so normal to them. Now, me and an Irish guy, there's not the hug and 2 kisses in Ireland. There's maybe a hug and a pat in the back. So it was interesting to observe, but they really missed it. And now that things are changing again, people are wondering, well, should I, shouldn't I, make that connection. But I love what you're saying there in your example of sitting there in the moment, observing what is going on, or the sun is shining outside, or the blossom. They're the little moments that can give us joy in our lives. For example, I love spring here right now because the sun is shining, it's getting warmer, and stuff's starting to grow. The greenery's coming again, the blossom on the trees. Appreciating those little things and nature is key for me. That certainly brings joy.
Yeah, nature is definitely a source of happiness. The other thing that you had mentioned about should I or shouldn't I, that's where consent comes in. I don't assume that anybody's okay with a hug now. I mean, I always asked first before, but I'm even more conscientious. A friend had posted that she had just gone to a conference where people wore tags that, if it was a red light, it was okay, stay 6-7 feet away from me. If it was a yellow light, we could stand close enough to talk, but not touch. And if it's a green light, full on hugs. So I think a lot of us are re-examining the idea of consent and what that means. So I don't assume anybody is comfortable with touch. I mean, even people in my own life, like friends that I haven't seen in a while, I'll ask them, is it okay to hug? And they're all okay with that. So I think this now more than ever, we need to realize that even if we can't touch, we can still love. That hasn't gone anywhere.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'm going to find different methodologies to be able to achieve that. And in relation to happiness, and your example of there right now in that present moment, can happiness fade away over time?
If we say that happiness is fleeting, it may very well be true if we're seeing happiness as something out there. Many years ago, I facilitated a workshop with my friend Peter, and it was called Happiness is Just the Icing, Joy is the Cake. So joy is the substance. The icing is sweet, but it could melt away. Some people scrape, eat the icing first. So if we look at joy and contentment as the center focus, the core of what life is about, eventually, yeah. I mean, if you're going to take the metaphor further, you can eat the cake and it's going to be gone. But if we can look at what it is that life itself, like I'm grateful to be alive. I had a heart attack in 2014 and I had pneumonia when I was right before Ireland. People die from pneumonia. I have COPD. People die from that. So I look at every day as precious. I've also learned that everybody in our life is on loan to us. My husband died in 1998. So it's been a little more than 23 years. And when he was in the ICU, I was having what I call my Godversations. And I do that all the time now. And I said to God, he's mine and you can't have him. And God said, nope, he's mine and he's on loan to you like everybody else in your life. So I live by that. I do my best to appreciate everybody in my life because who knows? I don't know how long any of this is going to be around.
Very, very good point. I'm starting to realize that, as my eldest daughter is 18 and growing up, a young woman, and at some point she's going to fly off. And it's, conversations with my wife tomorrow about, we are the children that we rear, we're rearing them to fly. At some point they're going to fly.
Yeah.
It's not like that little unit's going to be there forever. They'll fly and we need to be there, and people come and go. So it's a very good point.
Yeah.
Very good point.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. My son is going to be 35 in 10 days. He's going to be 35. And we live very close by. I watch my grandson in the mornings, and then I'll be watching the new baby as well, so that they can go to work. And the kids still need their parents. He still asks for advice. He's still, even though he's living an independent life. And when you're talking about raising children, I heard this brilliant young woman who I met at a conference where I spoke. And I gave her a ride to the train station afterwards. And she was telling me that she had gotten pregnant unintentionally, but she had a miscarriage. And she said, as sad as I was, I knew that I was not prepared to be a mother right then. She said, think about this. When you have a child, you're not raising a child, you're raising an adult. So think about, if you're a parent, what kind of adult do you want to raise? A lot of people go into relationships and parenting totally unconsciously, like let the chips fall where they may. And I encourage people to enter in every relationship that you're in fully conscious. What's my intention? What kind of person do I want to raise? And it doesn't mean controlling your child's life and saying, you have to pick this career. I mean, when I was growing up, my parents said about, career, job, they said, pick any kind of career you want, as long as, number one, you like it. Number two, you can support yourself.
So very good advice.
Yeah,
very good advice.
It served me well. So what did I do? So overachiever, workaholic, have multiple overlapping jobs. I have never in my adult life, to the best of my memory, had only one job at a time. So, call it.
It's not easy to find that thing that we love doing, though, is it?
I love doing it all. Everything that I listed in the beginning of this conversation, I love doing it all. I mean, my primary focus, my primary passion is writing. I can't not write. So everything is grist for the mill. Everything is a writing prompt in my life.
Storytelling.
Yep. Yeah. Story. And as an Irishman, I don't know if that's in the blood, but most Irish people
My father's a fantastic storyteller. He's studied his English literature and masters. He's a great guy for the poetry and Shimashini and all these things. But could you tell me more about I love the title, The Blessed Mistress.
Yep. Blessed Mistress Guide to Transforming the Ordinary into the Extraordinary is my book that came out in 2011. And it's what I call chicken soup for the soul kind of stories, slice of life stories. And the last two of them were about my hospice journey with my mother. She died in 2010 while I was in the process of writing the book. And she said, you need to finish this book so I can read it. And I said, then you're going to have to live a whole lot longer because it's nowhere near done. So she was living in Fort Lauderdale, Florida at the time, and my dad had died 2 years earlier. So I would go down there as often as I could from Philadelphia and sit by her bed and just type. And I would read her excerpts from the book. So she was part of what kicked me into high gear to finish the book. So the book is about the idea that Joseph Campbell posited, about following your bliss. But I took it a step further, because if we're following our bliss, it's something out there. If we be our own bliss, if we're able to be that essence of whatever bliss is, then we live that rich, full, juicy life. A few years before I wrote the book, I taught a workshop called BYOB, Be Your Own Bliss. Yeah. And on the way in, this woman said to me, oh, you're the bliss master. You're going to teach us how to live blissfully. And I thought, that's pretty cool. And at the time, I was in a relationship with somebody who, when I told him about it, he says, oh, no, not bliss master, bliss mistress. And you know how we were on the phone when we had this conversation. And you know how when you know somebody really well, you could see the sparkle in their eye over the phone. Yeah. So he said, but if you're going to call yourself that, you better be living it. So I want to hear that you're living blissfully. So he was one of the people to whom I dedicated the book. The romantic relationship, didn't last, but the friendship has. And we talk to each other every few months. We catch up with each other. So he was the inspiration for the title of the book. Yeah.
I love your choice of words in some of these. They capture the attention, to say the least.
Thank you. So yeah, it definitely is storytelling, because people, you look at Jesus, he taught by parables. When I was in my
sorry, Edie, that's something that I was younger, or reading various stories, like why is this told in such a way? And as I get older, you realize the simplicity of it. It's telling a story in a way that someone else can appreciate or relate to or understand, that suddenly makes sense. It's simplistic in itself, as opposed to a big, complicated, convoluted way. Yes. But it's about, sometimes we overcomplicate things in our mind. I certainly did, where we just need to accept it like little children, or just be like, okay, so that means that and that. All right, okay, so I should try that and see what happens. Why not?
Yeah, and storytelling is beautiful in that even if the listener didn't live it, they're in it. If the best storytellers I know invite people in, so it's like they're experiencing it vicariously, and that really helps. I remember when I was in my 20s, I worked for the South Jersey Council on Alcoholism, and we did drug and alcohol abuse prevention education in the schools. We were teaching the teachers how to teach the kids about that. And I was working with a man who had worked for Catholic Social Services, and he was a mentor of sorts while he trained me. Yeah. And I'm listening to him, and I'm thinking, he sounds so polished. And here I am shuffling my cheat sheets and cue cards and stumbling over my words. I was in my early 20s. And after one particularly embarrassing presentation where I totally lost track of what I was saying, I asked him, I said, how do you do this? You're so comfortable. You're so polished. He says, stories. When you have stories to share, it'll be easy for you too. So all these years later, I'm now 63, 40 some years later, I wish I could find him. I don't even remember his name, and say, I finally have stories. And everywhere, like I said, everything is a writing prompt. Everything is a story prompt. So I invite people that are listening to this to go out there and create your own stories.
Yeah, one thing is, in my own personal development, we all have a story to share. We've all lived a life, and that is our story. Yeah. And when we share it with others, surprisingly, we'll find out that a lot of other people have had similar joys, experiences, highs, lows, that they can share back with you. And we'll soon come to the realization that we all have so many similarities as humans who don't know each other, that you can start to connect and bond. And that comes from opening up and communication, just taking that first step of openness. And I do believe, yeah, we all have a story to share. Certainly, my mother and father have written books, and my mother wrote a book. She actually wrote two, but one was about her healing from fourth stage bowel cancer, because she just wanted to share her story. She never thought she had something to share, and then after that, she wrote her story about growing up and rearing 14 children. So no matter whether you have one child or no child or whatever, everyone has a story to share, and we should share it more in whatever methodology we want. So
yeah, that is amazing. When you first mentioned, that you're one of 14. My grandmother was one of 13, and I asked my mother. I said, "How did they do it?" She says, "Well, the older kids help take care of the younger kids." I said, "No. Financially, how did they do it?" Because my great grandfather owned a corner store, so somehow they found a way to manage. And how do they find a house big enough?
Oh, it's yes. Trust me, things are different these days. A lot of people know it's the comforts of life that we take for granted. It's sharing, it's working together, as you said. And I am my older sister Shan. So there's the two of us, and then there's a gap of 5 years to the next. And sort of there was like we were the helpers to the parents to the younger ones, sort of like the second parents. But yeah, it's all about working together and helping. So, in relation to, we were talking about happiness earlier on, and various things that we enjoy or do to sort of create that. Is there any things that you do or you suggest to us that to seek comfort or solace or to relax or to find that calm or that peace to chill us out in this busy lifestyle that we all rush around living?
Right. I encourage people, first of all, every day, just to take a few minutes. It doesn't even have to be 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever, to meditate, to just, it doesn't have to be a structured meditation, although there are plenty out there, but just take a moment to stare into space. We put down the idea of daydreaming. Do it, no matter what age we are, we need to shut down the monkey mind that's chattering at us all the time and just look out the window or sit outside and breathe. Yesterday was warm in my area. It's supposed to be like almost 80 today. So I was sitting out on the deck on my lounge chair, just gazing up into the sky in between seeing my clients. And I have this sense of peace, like a sense of renewal. So that's helpful. I've started doing this exercise in the shower, not physical exercise, but that I've been encouraging people to do. When I get in, turn the water on, I say to myself, I'm washing away anger, fear, hatred, violence, violent thoughts, guilt, shame, everything I want to let go of, and goes down the drain. And then when I'm soaping up, I say, and I'm washing in peace, love, healing, connection, abundance, prosperity, contentment, bliss, all that good stuff, just like popcorn, stream of consciousness. Yeah. So by the time I get out of the shower, I'm not just physically clean, I feel cleaner emotionally. And it's a good start for the day. I mean, if you take a shower at night, you can do it at night too. It doesn't matter what.
But that's a great one, because our minds are constantly thinking. If I challenge anyone to sit and try to stop thinking, that is a challenge. And when they do, and just observe whatever it is, meditation or whatever way they want to do that. Right. Sometimes just being still in that moment, it really does wonders for us, doesn't it?
Yeah. And it's about witnessing, just stepping back, saying nothing, doing nothing. It's been a long journey for me to recognize that I'm a human being, not a human doing. The heart attack was a wake-up call, but it wasn't the last wake-up call. I've had several others that tell me I need to slow down and just be as fully present as I can. So that heart-to-heart connection with people, if you are with people who are willing to share hugs, hug heart-to-heart, you kind of come into resonance with other people's hearts. If you're not comfortable hugging, or if you're living alone, hug a tree. If an animal will let you, hug an animal. If you live with
Yeah,
that, with animals, um, do something kind. Do an act of kindness, whether other people find out that you do it or not.
yeah, exactly.
Um,
Great point.
Send, whether or not you pray, send good feelings to other people. Connect with the people in your life, because this is such a time of isolation for many of us. Reach out to people. Reach out and ask for support.
Yeah,
You
yeah.
know, you
And now is the time that when we have phones and we have methods of communication, and a lot of us don't use it. But
right.
pick up that phone and ring that person, or ring that family member, or that friend
Mhm.
that we haven't
Yeah.
contacted in a while. And sometimes or that client, sometimes you're surprised by you come off the phone with a smile going, well, why didn't I ring them beforehand? Or why didn't I make that connection?
Mhm. Yeah.
Because we see it as too challenging, or, I don't have
Mhm.
time. We need to slow down and take the time and connect with each other, especially after this pandemic. As you said, there's a lot of people, including young children, been affected by this in their little minds and mentally, and talks of suicide and various things. And these things are happening, and
Yeah.
now's the time to reach out and share that love. I would
Mhm.
100% agree with you, Edie. It's so important in this day and age. It's always been important, but even
Mhm.
more so in times
I
like now.
and I yeah, I think about my parents' generation, our parents, because we're probably around the same age, our parents' generation who survived World War II, the Korean War, the Great Depression. My dad grew up in South Philadelphia during the Depression. Um, I think about in my lifetime, the Vietnam War, the Cold War.
Mhm.
Um, what else? The Civil Rights Movement. The murders of the assassinations of JFK, RFK, and MLK, and Malcolm
Mhm.
X.
Yes, yes.
So I don't know if there was ever a time in human history where there was peace, but wouldn't it be nice, right?
Yeah,
As a
yeah,
therapist, I try to wrap my mind around why people do violent acts, and I know there are deep wounds that people have, and part of my chosen role is to help people heal their wounds, so they break the cycle, so they don't do harm to anybody in their lives,
yeah, yeah,
in their personal lives or out there in the world. Who knows what thoughts go on in the minds of people that do mass killings, or in the mind of someone like Vladimir Putin, who just, I can't wrap my own mind around that. Thank goodness.
yeah.
It must be a very dark, scary place
I'd
in
say
his
so.
head.
It's to go there to understand those things would be
Hmm.
mind-boggling. But it for millennia, humans have always been fighting each other. Why is that? Why is this the case, guys? But um, to try and find peace, even though at times we think, oh, our world's at peace, or we're in a peaceful nation or whatever, but yet somewhere else in the world, there's some tribe fighting another tribe, or some
Hmm.
nation fighting another
Yeah.
nation. So
Yeah.
it's ongoing. So
Right.
where we can share hugs with each other, share peace, share kindness, share joy, share happiness.
Hmm.
The more of us who do it, hopefully, the more the more love can be spread out to the world, because there's
Yeah.
enough um, sadness and hatred out there as it is. So I've certainly encourage everyone to hug heart to heart, as
Yep.
Edie reminds
Right.
us.
Yeah. And even if you can't be in someone's physical presence, you could do a virtual hug. You want to try one? Let me show you what
Go
that
ahead,
is. Okay.
go.
So a virtual hug is wrap your arms around yourself. Okay. And take a deep breath in and close your eyes and envision the last hug you had with somebody that you're really missing, that whether it's because of the pandemic, or because they're no longer on this planet, or because they live too far away. So imagine hugging them. And then imagine the next hug you're going to have with somebody that you haven't seen in a while, that you really are looking forward to hugging. And just let the energy flow through your body. And what happens when we hug, whether it's physical touch or virtual like now, is that the brain chemical oxytocin starts kicking in, and it's it's called the cuddle hormone. And it's a really good painkiller as well. So what I say is the more oxytocin, the less oxycontin.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
So
Thank you for that virtual hug. It
sure,
brought
my
me back
pleasure.
to thoughts come through the mind. It's great. You think things. The so we'll wrap things up here, Edie, because I'm sure you have many other things to be getting on with to make helping people as you do.
Thank
I
you.
would just two simple questions. You can give them short answers or carry on with them. But what are you grateful for?
Life. I'm grateful for, and this is part of my prayers every day. I'm grateful for my family and friends. I'm grateful for my health, for their health. Knock wood, none of, I haven't contracted COVID. My son and daughter-in-law and the baby haven't, and the people in my life that have recovered. Thank goodness. I haven't lost anybody to the disease. So I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that I could support myself well. So I reached that goal that my parents talked about, that I have work that I love and that I can support myself. I'm grateful that I recovered from all the different conditions that I've dealt with. I'm grateful for new opportunities. I always think about when I make a new connection, you were existing on the other side of the world. I didn't even know you existed until you reached out to connect. So I'm grateful for opportunities to make new friends. I love the term anamkara. Are you familiar with that term?
Yep,
Yeah.
I've certainly
Yeah,
heard it all.
soul friend that John O'Donohue. I don't know if he kind of made it famous, put it out there in the world. So I'm grateful for meeting kindred spirits.
Yeah.
And I sense that you are one of them. I'm grateful that what else? That I have the opportunity to be a force for good in the world, as do you and everybody else on the planet.
Yeah, fantastic. One point you mentioned there, our health really is our wealth. It's a quick statement, but it's so important, our health and our wealth. And hugs or things to bring joy or love to others or happiness, they actually benefit our health in many ways. So those little things we're talking about to the listener, if we put them into practice, they actually benefit our health and our physical well-being. And as a result of that, then we should reduce the time going to doctors and various things. Now, there's so many other things we can do, eat healthily and exercise, etc., etc. But some of these simple things bring so much well-being and goodness into our bodies. Like I love the shower analogy. Well, put that into practice. So I encourage everyone to listen back and think upon the things we're talking about, because there's little golden nuggets in there. There's little seeds that can help us all in our lives, and we can little takeaways that we can put into practice. I certainly have taken away things from our conversation, Edie, and appreciate your time.
My pleasure.
One last thing then, and I think I could answer it for you, but how are you making the world better?
I would like to think it's just by being a living example of making a difference, like the intention of making a difference in the world. I think about every decision that I make through the lens of, is this going to benefit not only me, but the world? Because it's so easy to think, oh, this will, I don't care whether it helps anybody else. I do. I grew up with parents who were active volunteers in our community, even into their 80s. When they moved down to Florida, they still volunteered in their community. So I like to think that just by considering what decision I'm about to make is going to affect the world. Yeah. And that's not meant to sound arrogant or lofty or woke or any of the terms that people use. It's just what I can't not do that. So
Edie,
that's what I'm hoping.
You're healing the world one hug at a time.
I'd like to think that. Thank you. I appreciate that. And if people want to reach me. My website is www.opti-mystical.com. I'm also on Facebook.
I'll put the links in the
Thank you.
in the video, and also in the audio below it. I'll also put in the text, so
Thank you.
we can connect. But I really, really do appreciate your time. It's been such a pleasure having a conversation with you, and certainly look forward to chatting to you again. And I would encourage everyone to have a look at Edie's website, because we can learn from each other, and Edie has a story to tell. So from me, an Irishman in Italy, to Edie in, where is it, Pennsylvania or Philadelphia?
Dublin, Pennsylvania. I'm in Dublin.
In Dublin, the second Dublin.
Yep.
Very good. So bye from me, Edie.
Thank you. You take good care.